Hey, it's Wiley Sharp with Catamaran Central, and I'm here with Bill Regan for episode 2 of Cat Chat Live. Today, we're going to kind of follow the same format as episode 1, and just, because this is a newer thing, just kind of reintroduce ourselves. But my name's Wiley Sharp. My wife and I started Catamaran Central back in late 2020, with our focus being on, catamaran sales. So I handle yacht sales. Laura handles all of the back office stuff that I don't want to deal with, as well as sells charters too. So she has the pleasure of dealing with things like, Boat World or the state of Florida and those kind of things. So we're highly focused on catamarans. We do a lot of video marketing. And so we thought it'd be fun to start kind of a live recorded podcast. So just a brief introduction on who I am. And today I'm joined again with Bill Regan for episode 2.
Hey, thanks, Wiley. Yeah, I am a broker based in the Mid-Atlantic, though got my start in this down in Florida, in the Florida Keys, back in like 2011. So been at this for like 15 years now, focused heavily in the catamaran market for the last 10 years or so. When I moved up to Clearwater, Florida, worked with the moorings and Leopard for a while. I've also owned a number of boats over the years, upgraded them, and cruised on them. So it's kind of a well-rounded, I guess, experience in the boating world the last decade and a half here. So yeah,
I think that's a good point you brought up, Bill, is the fact that you own a boat currently, and you've owned boats in the past. So I think that's something that collectively differentiates us from a lot of brokers in this space is the fact we're actually boat owners. Like I saw on Instagram the other day, you posted, that you and the family were out. I don't know if it was just for a tender ride, if you took the boat out sailing or not. But that's kind of, this isn't just what we do, but it's also kind of who we are and what we enjoy. And having, brokers that understand boat ownership, I think is of great value.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we were out there, spending time on the boat. We dock in Baltimore now, so it's a great base to explore, the upper Chesapeake and stuff. But I mean, the flip side of owning a boat is I'm always working on the boat too. So, just the other day I was troubleshooting a bow thruster issue, which has been kind of nagging me for a while now, scratching my head around it, and I ended up changing out the alternator on the engine and then adjusting the idle speed. And it seems to, fingers crossed on this, but it seems to be addressed now. So, yeah, not that we see many
We all know
thrusters on
that
catamarans, but if somebody's out there needs some advice on it, feel free to get in touch.
if there's one thing I know about bow thrusters, Bill, is when they decide to fail is always when you need them the most too.
Yeah, it's a 20 knot crosswind in a
Yeah.
tight fairway coming into a dock is usually
Yeah.
the case. But
That's the advantage of a catamaran, I suppose, right?
but yeah. But it gives you a lot of perspective on, what people are dealing with as a boat owner, whether their prospective boat owner, maybe a repeat coming into it again, upgrading to a catamaran, downsizing from a catamaran on the selling side. It just kind of gives us a unique perspective on, what a boat actually means to a person, because it is an emotional investment as well as a physical one and a financial one. So it's, it hits a lot of points, and having been there and lived through it several times maybe gives us a little bit of a different perspective than some folks that are out there.
Yeah, I had a frustrating situation. I've got a power catamaran, like a center console fishing boat. And I really was feeling for our clients a couple weeks ago. We were getting the boat ready to take to the Exumos, and the boat had to go in for a yard period for, lower unit maintenance, engine service, upgrade the steering system, compound wax, all the normal kind of annual maintenance stuff. And it was very humbling for me to have literally everything go wrong that possibly could have gone wrong during that yard period. And really, going through stuff like that really helps us better understand what our clients are going through, or what they're, potentially going to be going through once they enter into yacht ownership.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's that saying out there that, cruising is high highs and low lows. And then, I mean, that could apply to boat ownership in general. But, it's like, yeah, I mean, we get it when you're, stuck with a west wind in the Abacos and you can't go anywhere for 3 days because there's a rage, coming in the cut. And,
yeah,
you're just anchored in, wherever bit of rock you can find to hide behind. And those are the low lows. And then of course there's those, highs where you get this beautiful sunsets, that perfect day of sailing, meeting new friends, at the beach bar and, all that great stuff too.
So that's who we are. And let's go ahead and just jump into our next segment, which we like to call it Between Two Hulls. And this segment's where we just kind of, talk about just different topics in the yachting and catamaran world, and things that we're contending with. And Bill and I both thought that talking a bit about the hurricane season would be a really, really applicable topic for today. And kind of what we want to talk about is the different choices our clients, boat owners make during the hurricane season. So we'd like to just kind of talk about those for a few minutes. So, traditionally, August and September are the worst months of hurricane season, even though it technically runs June 1 to November 1. And during that timeline, boat owners do a lot of different things. For most of our clients here in catamarans, that decision is to either head north or south and put the boat up on the hard. So a lot of our clients go to, St. Lucia or Grenada, and they'll either store their boats in the water or on the hard because those areas tend to be less prone to hurricanes. But the other option is, taking the boat up north, whether that's to the mid-Atlantic, to New England, to a place like Brunswick, Georgia. There's a lot of options there. So uh, I guess we're kind of free flow in this. And a lot of what we do, we have our notes and we want it to be real organic. So a lot of this is just kind of free flow. And so why don't we just start down south and make our way north and just talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each of those locations. And we're going to bunch, Grenada and St. Lucia, I think, into one is the lower Caribbean. So what are some of the pros and cons, Bill, in your opinion of heading down to Grenada or St. Lucia for the hurricane season?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a couple pros are, whether you're going to stay on the boat down there or, haul it and keep it there for the season. When you do start up cruising again, whether that's, later in November, December, you're already in paradise, right? That's like the peak time to be down there, especially if you've maybe gone north for a couple, months to catch up with family or whatever. Um, and then it starts getting cold and you're right back into the tropics. And, I think Grenada's got great infrastructure. There's some great boatyards down there that can
Yeah,
haul really
Clark's
big.
Fort, Spice
Yeah.
Island Marine, Grenada Marine can all haul catamarans.
Yeah. And then, they built a cottage industry around that too. So, I mean, there are, sail rigging companies down there that will, you can pay them a package price. They're going to take your sails off. They're going to store them, climate control. They're going to put them back on, and recommission the boat for you before it goes back in the water in, November or whatever that is. It's affordable. I mean, at least Grenada, I mean, they use the Eastern Caribbean dollar. So yeah, I mean, you go out to dinner there for, 3 or 4 people and the bill comes, it's $120, but then you look at your credit card statement when you get back home after the conversion, it was like, $80 or something. So, there's that pro to it as well. I mean, the cons are, if you're going to stay on the boat, this is this is the worst time of the year to be down there. Um,
Dengue fever, chikungunya, Zika virus. I've gotten all of them.
okay, yeah, but yeah, and then I mean, Grenada is historically out of the hurricane belt, but we did see a couple of years ago that storm came through. I forget the name of it off the top
Yeah,
of my head.
Burl that went through Carriacou.
Yeah, yeah, I remember seeing like on one of the cruising forums where there's this picture of like somebody's AIS, and there's just like 80 boats headed south out of the south end of Grenada, so everybody had to scramble and run down to Trinidad. And then for boats that were left on the hard, and like the Grenadines, a lot of those got destroyed, knocked off the hard stand and stuff like that. So there is, I mean, that's kind of an outlier. But things seem to be changing here yearly, so you never know what could happen, this year or next.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you're planning on using your boat, we could put that into the pro category for Grenada
Hmm.
because with modern weather forecasting, we know a week out before storms really threatening an area or region. So I'm sure you have, just as I've had clients over the years, that they'll enjoy hanging out in, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, cruising in the Grenadines. And to your point, Bill, they see something coming, and it's like a mass exodus to the south end of Grenada or down to Trinidad. So a lot of optionality to run away from a storm. So moving north from there, and speaking of the infrastructure there, actually, so I lived in Grenada for about 2 years, running a mooring space down there, and the growth we've seen in the last 16, 18 years supporting the marine industry has been incredible down there. You mentioned rigging companies. Turbulence Rigging's been there forever. They do phenomenal work, whether you want new sails, new standing rigging, or somebody to do your off season, decommissioning and recommissioning. Island Dreams, which is owned by Mark and Anita Sutton, is a great company that I've dealt with them for almost 20 years now, and they provide guardianage and caretaking for absentee owners and do a phenomenal job. So I do think the infrastructure for the cruising industry in Grenada is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I would make the argument it's the best hurricane place to go in the Eastern Caribbean for all those different reasons. So just kind of heading north from there, we'll just touch briefly on St. Martin, BVI, the Leeward Islands. I personally, would not keep a boat in that region. I tell that to all of my clients. I think you're still too much in harm's way. And while there are some, pluses to San Martin and, the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico, I just don't think that any of the pros are outweighed by the fact that you're kind of in that hurricane, more in the hurricane zone than if you're further south.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the hurricanes, do track further up the island chain there, and I mean, insurance may dictate too that, I mean, I think most people's insurance policies don't want them there. So if you do stay there, it could be at your own, risk of, absorbing the full loss of the boat. Or, then if you have insurance and, many boats are damaged, you're, in a long line of people trying to get a claim or, get services done at that point. There's only so many, technicians and shipping, masts and things down there. It takes time and yeah.
I mean, we saw that very clearly in 2017 with Hurricane Irma and Maria. And I think one thing too that the yachting community does a good job at is supporting local communities. I will say during the aftermath of Irma and Maria, a lot of boat owners were like getting very frustrated with the pace in which work was being completed. And I just have to remind these people in those conversations, like, yeah, I get it. I understand you're frustrated because you're in a very long queue trying to get your boat back in the water. But you just got to give the community a bit of grace because they're working in that boatyard all day long and then going back to their home without electricity, without running water because the island's infrastructure is knocked out as well too. So yeah, I mean, personally, I would never leave my boat in the Leeward Islands during hurricane season.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you kind of made a good point about the insurance dictating where boats go and don't go. And you know, it all varies, so read your policy, but most boats need to be south of, St. Lucia, down in Grenada, based on the insurance policy, or heading north, they need to be north of the Florida Georgia border or Cape Hatteras. And so let's just jump into your neck of the woods, the Mid Atlantic, which is north of Cape Hatteras, and some of the pros and cons that you see as a resident of the Mid Atlantic for hurricane
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, the insurance is a big factor in that. The Chesapeake Bay, especially for catamarans, is just an overall more affordable place to keep a boat. Especially then, if you're trying to haul, we skipped over Florida a little bit. If you're trying to haul this time of year in Florida, there's, just limited space, limited yards that can take you. So you may be forced out of there anyway. But up here in the Chesapeake, we've got, a number of bigger, catamaran yards that have storage facilities, whether it's like Severn Yachting Center, Zimmerman's. And those are a little further down in the Chesapeake. But yeah, then, if you do decide to stay on the boat, dockage rates are, much more affordable outside of the general Annapolis area. But if you go into, some of the smaller towns that are, down in Virginia or Southern Maryland, down by Calvert County or something like that, or up here in Baltimore Harbor, rates are, going to be a lot more affordable to keep a boat here for a monthly rate than you're going to find a lot further south. And then, if you're, kind of in the Annapolis, Baltimore region, you want to leave the boat for a little while. You've got BWI that's, 25, 30 minutes away from either of those. You're connected to, anywhere in the country at that point, going to go home or travel. Also, it's kind of cool, if you're up here, you've spent some time down in the Bahamas or the Caribbean, you can kind of plan your summer around some like more urban events too. I mean, whether it's, the National Aquarium in Baltimore, you can jump on Amtrak or the MARC train and get down to DC and check out all the museums and everything down there. Or, even up to Philly or New York City, or all a couple hour trips on train, which is pretty affordable to do. And once you're in those cities, you can, walk or Uber around pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, when I was up there last summer visiting you for our open house, I'd never really given Baltimore a fair shake. Like you watch the old TV show The Wire, Baltimore got that negative connotation. But after coming up where you keep your boat at Anchorage Marina and just seeing that whole, inner harbor waterfront area, it's freaking awesome. I mean, you'd recommended that wood-fired pizza place, so I took the buyer to the Ultramaron, and that place was like freaking great. You've got, 100 restaurants within a 10-minute walk of that marina. You've got a grocery store 2 minutes away, a West Marine 2 minutes away. One of the challenges I think a lot of people have when cruising, especially like on the East Coast, is just access to things, right? But where you're based out of, Bill, you guys have insanely good access.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's especially if you want to take some time and do some of those boat projects, things like that up here. There's also good technicians and bottom cleaners and detailers and everything that come to the marinas. So it's a good place to kind of if you don't want to make the jump up to our next section in New England or whatever, and you just want to chill out for a couple months, before heading south again for the fall season. Yeah, it's a good place to kind of reset, take it easy for a month or two before you get back into that, checking weather every 10 minutes and moving down the coast again. And then, I guess on the other cool thing about this is you've got the Annapolis Boat Show in October, middle of October this year, but that's like become the de facto jumping off point for, cruisers to connect. Um, you know, see all the latest cool gadgets and stuff. But it's a really great scene for cruisers, especially sailboaters in one of the historic sailing capitals of the country. So you spend a week there, with the boat show, find your people, and then you kind of just go with them, on that journey south, or you can join one of the rallies that lead from the Chesapeake and go deeper into the Caribbean if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you haven't been to the Annapolis Boat Show, I strongly recommend going. I mean, just I love the Annapolis Boat Show so much that when my wife and I, after we got washed out by Hurricane Irma, we needed to figure out where we wanted to live. We loved Annapolis so much for the boat show that we ended up moving up there for almost, like a year and a half to almost 2 years. Yeah, I think like in terms of cons for the Mid-Atlantic, I guess, it is more of an urban destination if you're in, Annapolis or Baltimore or whatnot. I mean, we got to come up with some con, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can get brutally hot here.
Yeah, and the
You
heat
know,
is
yeah, I
is
mean,
bad.
we a couple weeks ago we were over 100 degrees, and then we got some smoke from Canada. Made it unpleasant for a few days, but then it cooled down again. Actually, this last week was really beautiful, like mornings in 70 degrees or whatever. But yeah, I mean, and the wind tends to drop off, from a sailing perspective. So if you're going to do a little bit more exploring, like go over to, St. Michael's or Rock Hall or something, I mean, it might just be a motorboat ride across the bay. Um, but that's all cruising anyway. you,
Yeah, no, the
you got to
wind's
just
never
do what the
blowing.
weather did. Yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of the last kind of destination that a lot of our people go to for the hurricane season would be, as Bill mentioned, New England. And that would kind of include, Long Island Sound, so Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine. I've not cruised up there a lot. I have spent quite a bit of time in Newport for yacht surveys over the years, especially kind of on the larger catamarans because they've got some pretty impressive haul out facilities in Newport, like Newport Shipyard or New England Boat Works and whatnot. Yeah, I would say the quality of work that you can get in Rhode Island, New England is arguably the best you can get anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. You pay for it, but the quality of tradespeople up there is really second to none. I mean, anywhere you go getting work done. And then, just the weather up there in the summer months. I mean, Laura and I did a road trip to Maine and back this summer. And coming from South Florida, I couldn't think of a place I'd rather be in the summertime than New England, whether it was, out in Montauk visiting a buddy out there or, just being up in Maine. And I mean, Maine really impressed me. That was my first time spending any time there, other than, just flying in for a survey. And the amount of just cruising up in New England, particularly, the main islands, is something I can't wait to explore and check out in the future because it's just stunningly beautiful, great hiking. The quality of food up there, whether it's like seafood, fresh produce, fresh protein, is like nothing we get in Florida or the Bahamas or the Caribbean. And I mean, I think that that would be a place that I would seriously consider spending my hurricane seasons, cruising. I think the biggest con to, New England, especially if you go all the way up to Maine, is just how far north it is. If your plan is to return back to the Caribbean, and then the cost. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I was born on the North Shore of Long Island, so that area is always near and dear to my heart. There's some really charming towns up there, whether that's Huntington, Northport, Port Jefferson. And then, you've got a couple hours sail across to Connecticut. And there's, all kinds of stuff to see over there. I've spent a bit of time in Newport back when I lived in New York. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of that classic New England, sailing center. I mean, beautiful yachts up there, sailing yachts, all the Hinkley's and stuff like that, all the pretty, even power boats. I mean, just everything just seems like a really beautiful boat up there. And then, yeah, I mean, you got Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket off
Nantucket,
the coast there.
Long
So, I mean,
Island.
yeah, I mean, if you could spend, probably your time bouncing around Long Island Sound and the islands off Massachusetts there, easily kill, 2 months with that before turning around and heading south. But yeah, then if you go further north to Maine, I mean, yeah, it's I guess one of the cons. I mean, you covered it pretty well, but the just the amount of time that you have to get up there, make cruising happen, and then get around and back because you don't really want to be there, much after probably what like mid-September. From a boating, I'm sure it's like beautiful if you're like hiking Mount Desert Island or doing a coastal
Right.
trip, but it's quite different when you're on the water trying to plan a passage and dealing with, really cold mornings and uncooperative winds and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're gonna go up in September for 3 nights, so
Okay.
I'll report back on how cold it is to this
Yeah, we'll
Florida
pick it
man.
up then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that was kind of, just a little between the hulls talking about being in the height of hurricane season, some of the popular areas that our clients tend to go for the off season, and some of the pros and cons there. Okay, for the next segment, every week we pick a make and model to highlight for the week and just kind of, have a conversation about that make and model, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, et cetera, et cetera. So for this week, we're going to be talking about the Fountaine Pajot Saba 50, which they started building that boat in like right around 2012, I think, is kind of when that model came out. And then they built it till about or did it come out in,
I think it was a little later, like 2015, 16, right?
was it that late? I think it, I think it was like 2014, 2015, maybe. Yeah, we'll have to double check that. They came out with it earlier than I originally thought.
2014.
2014. Okay.
Yeah.
What would we do if we didn't have all the information at our fingertips in
Yeah.
this day and age? But that was a game changing boat for Fountaine Pajot. It replaced the Selena 48, which, in my opinion, wasn't that great of a design, and that was kind of that older style FP like the Arana 44 or the Lavezzi 40. And the Saba 50 kind of took that DNA from the Helia 44 and just expanded upon it. And I think one of the best Fountaine Pajots ever built. I mean, I think the Helia 44 and the Saba 50 were the two boats that, had Fountaine Pajot not come out with them when they did, they probably wouldn't be a relevant brand today. But what are some of the things that you like about the Saba 50, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a big platform, when you get into any of these 50-foot production cats, but, I mean, I think it's also stood the test of time. You go on that boat, it's got, a forward cockpit seating area, it's got a fly bridge lounging area. So, I mean, boats tend to get bigger and they're bigger over the years, brands innovate and stuff like that. But it still feels like a relevant design. One of the other things I really love about it is the galley configuration with that island in the middle there with extra refrigeration in there. I don't know, it just feels like you're kind of like in a home kitchen more than, a boat galley. Um,
It's one of
and
my
then,
favorite galleys of, like, any production boat ever built. I mean, you have, like you said, it's like a residential galley in a 50-foot boat. I mean, it's arguably better than some of the galleys and some of the larger, uh, charter catamarans, like the Lagoon 620 or whatnot. Like, it's one of my favorite galleys on any boat.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And then, yeah, I mean, I like the porthole is the owner's version on the Saba 50. But it didn't dedicate the entire hull to the owner's version. They still have a really nice size head in there, great walk up bed, nice hanging lockers and everything. And then forward of that, you get another stateroom with another head in the forepeak, which I think is just a sensible, great use of space. I mean, when you get to this size boat, you don't need a full hull owner's version, in my opinion. I mean, you're not spending a lot of time down there aside from sleeping and personal hygiene needs. So yeah, I mean it's just a great use of space for whether you're going to make that extra storage up forward or have other guests, or if you got family with multiple kids, it's a great berth up there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they were really that was one of the first, production catamarans that came out with a 4 cabin owner's layout
Hmm.
in this kind of size range. And other builders followed suit with that similar layout. And I think the versatility of the layout really makes it an appealing boat for a lot of different use cases. So they had the 4 cabin owners version, they had the 5 cabin owners version, and then they had the 6 cabin charter layout on the boat. And so, it's been a great boat for, like Kevin and Tina that we know that
Hmm.
cruise as a couple full time. It's been a very comfortable boat for them. And then a number of clients that own or operate them in crude yacht charter, with the 5 cabin layout. So they're still able to accommodate 8 guests. And then having like a true 6 cabin layout, which is, bona fide charter layout, really gives you a ton of versatility in what the boat can be used for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just like you say, the versatility with various layouts that are available out there for your use case scenario. I was talking to a family that circumnavigated on one of these, with multiple kids, and they just had the 5 cabin version because that suited giving everybody their own space, which is super important. Especially if you're getting kids that are over 10 and they don't want to share the berth anymore with their brother or sister.
I think my personal favorite layout of that boat is the 5 cabin layout.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is it's still got all the same size cabins as the 4 cabin layout. You don't really lose anything in those other cabins. That 5th cabin's like a midship kind of on the starboard side layout. And it's not a great cabin. I mean, it works. In crude yacht charter, that's usually where the crew ends up living in that cabin, and it's an okay cabin. It's suitable. Um, But if you're not using it as a cabin, you end up with like literally a walk-in, pantry for storage. So I think you end up with just exponentially more usable storage than you do in the four cabin layout where it's just like a bank of hanging lockers and cabinets. And then having the head adjacent to that is really nice too, because it almost serves as like a day head for, if you have people over for happy hour or dinner on board or a day sail, or if you're, like an avid diver, it makes a great, dive locker because you've got fresh water in there. It's ventilated. You can hang wetsuits in, the shower, et cetera, et cetera. So for me personally, I think the five cabin layout is bar none the best layout for the Saba 50.
Yeah, it's a great use of space. I would say that, with the variety of layouts and, these boats being used for charter or owner use, the market can be, seem low and seem high. So without delving into, specifically, are we looking at the market for, five cabin or four cabin boats? Over the last 12 months, kind of the average sale price is 584,000. But right now on the market, you've got the lowest listing at 621 and the highest at 1.1 million. So, and that's, just kind of the full range of Saba 50s that are out there. So, it just depends on kind of your use case scenario, finding the right one, and, helping narrow down, what you're exactly looking for and, what's on the current market.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, a lot of these boats, I mean, I would be willing to bet 75% of them went into either bareboat charter or crude yacht charter with, 25% of them going into private use. And they built like right around 200 or so of these, I think, based on what I could find on the Saba 50. So it's like under 250 hulls. It's yeah, there's everything there, and if you want a private boat that's got, solar, lithium, hydraulic platform, loaded to the gills, et cetera, that boat's gonna be on the higher end of the market. I mean, I think 1.1 is absolutely crazy for a Saba 50 to be perfectly honest, but, something in the nines for, one of the last years of the production run and a private boat well equipped isn't, like, insane when look at, what else is out there. And then on the flip side, if your budget dictates that you don't have that much money to spend, you can still find one in the $600,000 range. It may not have the level of equipment, but it's gonna have that platform that you're looking for getting out and exploring, and then you can upgrade it and make changes over time to it to kinda make it more of your own.
Yeah,
Uh
you can always add upgrades to the boat, but you can't really lengthen it or widen it. It's
Yeah, I mean, I would personally, uh, go with a lesser equipped larger boat than a better equipped smaller boat. But, I like big boats and I cannot lie. Um,
okay.
but I think that, you can upgrade over time. I think a lot of people have this, like, vision of wanting everything in the boat right out the gate, and there's pros to that, but if your budget doesn't allow that, you don't have to have lithium batteries on day one of your cruising. If you're gonna be on a 3, 4, 5 year term of ownership, that could be something that you put a maintenance, reserve towards or upgrade reserve or whatever you wanna call it, and, do the upgrade after, year 1 or year 2. And with that technology changing so much, chances are you're gonna end up with something far better, equipment-wise than a boat that had lithium batteries put on 4 years prior to your purchase of the boat. So,
Right.
uh
Yeah. And depending on your location, I mean, you can kind of build that into your seasonal plan, like we were talking earlier. Like if you are, maybe not this year, but if next year you're planning to go to, Grenada for hurricane season, like we said, it's cheaper down there in general, labor rates and everything else. So, if you're on a budget and you're getting one of these more bareboat boats, then you can head down that way in a year or two and get the upgrade done down there for a bit cheaper than you would in, South Florida or Annapolis.
yeah, exactly. And I think too, like, I mean, I remember when I got into sailing, which is around the time, you've gotten into sailing too, but it's like the idea of you know, being able to forget to turn off your lights at night and not drain your battery by the morning time
Yeah.
was very different. And I think this day and age, people expect a lot of their boats, but you know, Columbus sailed across the Atlantic with a sextant and a compass and no charts. And I think it's more important to get out and get going than it is to make sure everything's like perfect before you leave, because otherwise you'll
Yeah.
never.
Yeah, you can get into some analysis paralysis for sure.
Yeah, but so yeah, we kind of rambled on off subject there a little bit, which is all good. What are there any cons to the Saba 50 that you don't like about the boat?
Not specifically about the Saba, but I mean, just in general, with any kind of larger boat like this, I mean, it does add to the overall cost of ownership over time, whether that's haul outs or dockage, that all charges by the foot. So, if you're a couple and you maybe you need that much space, maybe you don't, but it's just something to factor in, whether could still have an awesome cruising time on a 44 or 45 foot cat, and just save those incremental dollars over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like just generally speaking, for me, the one thing that I do not like about the Saba, and my biggest con or knock on the Saba, is the placement of that generator. I
Mm,
think that it's in the starboard engine room,
yeah.
and when you go into that starboard engine room, and they're really nice size engine rooms on the Saba, but having that generator kind of on the inboard side up, you've got decent access to the side where you change oil and that sort of stuff. But if you've got to do anything on the far side of the motor, so the inboard side of the generator, they've got like a little access panel that big in the cockpit that is in theory there, so you can open it up to access the impeller, for instance, better. And I think that's probably my biggest knock on the Saba, is where they place the generator. I find it incredibly annoying and difficult to work on at times. Okay, so that's pretty good breakdown of the Saba, and some of the things we really like about it, and I guess really only one big complaint. Next thing we always like to do is pick our boat of the week following that make and model. And so, Bill, I'll let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your Saba 50 of the week.
All right, yeah, I'm going to go with Singing Winds. She's a 2019, located down in Fort Lauderdale. It is the 5 cabin layout, so I like that this, gives you some flexibility, like we were talking about before, whether you want to put it into, like a charter fleet, where there's a crew cabin available. Maybe you want to, take some time and be a crewed for your own boat. This would be a good option for that. Some of the things I like about it, and I should have just generally on the Saba, I do like the way they have their bowsprits on these boats.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of integrated in, that fiberglass sprit. It just looks slick, performs well. So I think that's a pretty good one. But this boat does have that. So it's got the Gennaker, which is, I think, especially on boats this size, to keep them moving in lighter airs, it's just such a nice upgrade to have. It's got a good package overall. It does have the hydraulic swim platform. So if you're doing some sort of charter operation on it, that's just great for guests to kind of lounge behind the boat on. It's got the cockpit fridges and everything. It's got the high field dinghy, which is great. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's got newer sails as well, and some, good electronic upgrades. What I'd like to see a little more on this boat is a little bit bigger solar package. They've got, 4 panels, 165 watts each. Doesn't mention lithium batteries in the listing, so I'm guessing that probably means
Yeah,
there's
it's got
not.
AGMs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's right. You said you were on this boat not long ago, so yeah, so I mean, I think for that kind of premier cruising class boat in the marketplace, it's they should either, if they don't have that, it should be priced accordingly. So this one's asking, 720,000, which is, I think, not a bad price for 2019 on the surface, but lacking some of those upgrades. I think they hopefully have a little bit of room to negotiate for the next owner to add those things.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I've been on the boat. I was on it before they did the final detail. And generally speaking, like it's a solid boat. But to your point, kind of following our point of conversation earlier, it wasn't a boutique charter fleet down in the Virgin Islands. And so it's got some of the nice upgrades on it, but there's still room for adding to it for somebody that wants to take the boat private, like upgrading the solar, putting in lithium batteries, upgrading the Victron. But yeah, I mean that's all
Very
easily
doable.
easily accomplished stuff. So for my Saba 50 of the week, it's shameless self promotion. It's a 2020 Fountaine Pajot six cabin layout named Libra. That boat runs crew yacht charters out of the Virgin Islands. And so it's based over in the BVIs. It's with our friends at And Beyond Yacht Charters that manage quite a few of our clients' boats and do a great job just doing full turnkey yacht management for charter boats down in the BVIs. The reason I like the boat is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the versatility of the layout. This is a six cabin boat and they are able to run, 8 pack, 10 pack charters on it. They try to really do 8 packs because 10 pack charters can be challenging for a crew of two to deliver the level of service the customer expects. But it is still a possibility on that boat to run 10 pack charters. I think really where the value in that layout comes from is the fact that it is six cabin boat, primarily runs 8 pack charters. So if you've got mom and dad, their kids, and then grandkids on board the boat for like a multi-generational family charter. Even if you've got, six, seven, or eight people, there's enough cabins where, your 13-year-old daughter's not sharing a cabin with her 11-year-old brother. People can kind of spread out throughout the boat, which I think is a pretty big selling point
Yeah.
in that size range and price point for boats and charter. In terms of equipment, it's, got kind of what you would expect in a boat operating in charter. So it's got, generator, air conditioning. It's got, a mantis anchor and some other minor upgrades. But the main focus on that boat is charter operation. And that boat is a workhorse and puts in quite a few weeks of charter every year. And if somebody's looking for a turnkey charter boat, she definitely would be a good option.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, these boats that are already kind of revenue generators, tax write-offs for folks, that can make a seamless transition into, boat ownership. And I think, if you're not ready to go full-time cruising, still got a couple of years to, work or sell your, firm or whatever it is, getting something that's, in a crude charter fleet. So, you got a pro crew looking out for it, a great outfit like And Beyond, as a good way to, get the boat now and then, have more of those plans to upgrade it, when it comes time.
Yeah, and that's what I would recommend to anybody buying it that wanted to keep it in crew yacht charter is don't make those cruising upgrades until you're ready to go cruising. Sweet. And then every week we're going to end this with a frequently asked question that we get as yacht brokers pretty much every day. So one of the things we get asked pretty much by every buyer is what are the hours on the engines or generator? And so, Bill, you've had that question asked of you hundreds, if not thousands of times. Same for me as well, too. And why is that important? And why at times is too much emphasis put on that, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, it is important because it's a big ticket item. If and when you ever have to replace an engine, I mean, it's gonna, lay you up in terms of, finding the right people who can do that. Depending on the boat model, it can be kind of intrusive to get that done. There's not only the cost of the engine, but there's the cost of the labor involved in getting it done. You definitely want somebody who knows what they're doing when they're getting involved with that. That said, I mean, modern diesel engines run and run and run. You know, we see some diesels, over 8,000, could go to 10,000 hours on those engines. generators, because they're a constant load, can run much longer, 15, 17,000 hours in some instances. Now, that's not to say you don't have to do anything. They're just going to keep running. I mean, you obviously have to maintain them, follow the maintenance records that are in the particular brand of engine, whether it's Yanmar, Volvo, Beta, whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think so. Historically, like when I was working for the moorings, a lot of those boats come out of the charter fleet with 2,500 to 3,500 hours. 3,500 sounds like a lot on a boat. And, it's going to, but that will have had as much use in a certain span of time that it's probably ever going to have again. So, the average cruiser maybe puts 150, 200 hours a year on their engine. So if you start to think about that, if you own a boat for 5 years, you do 200 hours a year, that's 1,000 hours in your time of ownership. Now, if the engine can, go 10,000 hours, you've got several owners beyond that, and maybe even the lifetime of the boat, that it's going to be able to have that engine in there.
Yeah, I think like it's incredibly important, but it doesn't tell the whole story of the boat. And I think a lot of buyers, particularly people that have not owned boats before, kind of look at that number with maybe a little bit too much emphasis because it's the closest thing to odometers, miles on your odometer on a car when shopping for a car, and that we have in the boating world. And I mean, I know both of us have seen scenarios where, I sold a Lagoon 560 called A3, and they bought a new generator for it, but they didn't put the new generator in because the Onan that was on board was running like a sewing machine at 24,000 hours. And the whole idea of taking that perfectly functioning generator out, even though it had such high hours, made zero sense. And we went to survey that generator, surveyed flawlessly. I mean, the surveyor noted that it was, high in hours and, due for replacement. But I think the new owner went, the whole next season with the old Jenny before he finally popped the new one in that came with the boat that was in storage. So I think that, engine hours, generator hours are important, but they don't really tell the full picture. I mean, using the example of a boat coming out of moorings, in a lot of instances, those boats are having the engine oil change, belts change, impellers changed every 3 months. I mean, when I was running operations for them, we had the A3, B6, and C12, which was our maintenance schedule for all the boats in the fleet. And, engines like to be used. So lack of use is equal, can be abuse too, is that saying. And, I've seen engines like that, generator with 24,000 hours like a sewing machine. And then I've seen, oil coolers on a 350-hour engine, blow on the way to the Bahamas. And so I think like kind of overall quality of maintenance almost is more valuable. Like I'd rather personally buy a motor on a 5-year-old boat with 2,500 hours on it that looks good, that's been maintained, that surveys well, than a motor with 250 hours on it over 5 years. Because these engines like to be run, they need to be run, and running it at the dock for an hour a month just to turn it over. That's actually not good for a diesel engine. Like diesels like to be run under
Yeah,
load, and so
absolutely. Yeah.
I think that there's that interesting point between like too many hours and too few of hours based on the age of the boat.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one thing that's we're starting to see more and more of is I'm talking to people, and they barely run their generator anymore because they've outfitted it with 2,000 watts of solar and they have 1,200 amp hours of lithium batteries. And, yeah, I mean, if they get a weeks of clouds or something, they turn the generator on for a couple hours to help keep up with things, or, it's real stagnant night and they need to run, more than one air conditioner or whatever it is. Or they're just running it to maintain it kind of thing with the generator. But yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon now when you see a boat, that had that front load of engine or generator hours, then somebody upgraded it with the solar and lithium, and then it goes up 30 hours in the next, 3 or 4 years because they just
Right.
don't need it anymore almost. And, Yeah, I mean, it's a whole different discussion, but probably in the next, 5, 10 year horizon, we're going to start to see more, electronic propulsion options available. I mean, that stuff's going to, trickle down from the automotive industry and, all these other ones into the marine industry at some point. I mean, we see some manufacturers going that way or offering hybrid propulsion options now. So that's something to bear in mind too. If you're buying a boat that has 4,000 engine hours now, and you're planning to have it for 5 years, and put another 1,000 or even 2,000 hours on it, that engine's probably going to be fine. And at that point, if you do want to replace it, there might be a really good hybrid solution out there that you could go to at that point because this technology is just getting better and better all the time.
Yeah, that'll be a really lengthy FAQ segment for a quick video. The electric side of things. So, well, there you have it. That's episode 2 of Cat Chat. Thank you, Bill, so much for making some time in your schedule to sit down and do another episode. And yeah, if you guys have any questions on anything, leave a comment down below. Shoot us an email. I'll have the links to the boats in the description down below or in the show notes. And if you like this formatted podcast, video podcast, definitely hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when we drop the next episode.